Welcome to our deep dive in the heart of a question that's intrigued historians and analysts, I think, for centuries, really. What drives Russia? What makes Russia tick?
Absolutely. It's a question that, never ceases to fascinate. And I think
Yeah.
the piece that you shared with me, what drives Russia, unraveling the mysteries of a nation's soul. See, it really gets to the core of this.
It does. It really goes beyond, the typical kind of political or economic explanations, right?
Right.
And it suggests that to truly understand Russia and how it acts on the world stage, we need to go deeper. We need to delve into this historical and even spiritual roots of its identity.
Yeah, the historical and spiritual, I think that's key because it's about their sort of national soul, right? What makes them and how that has informed how they've acted over the centuries, really.
And speaking of that, one of the things that really caught my eye in the piece was this idea of Moscow as the third Rome.
The third Rome, yeah.
It sounds almost mythical.
Right.
Can you unpack that for us? What does that even mean, this third Rome idea?
Well, I think to understand that we have to go back to the 15th century with Ivan III, the Grand Prince of Moscow at the time, and, his marriage to Sophia Paleologo, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor.
Okay.
Now, this wasn't just a marriage. This was a symbolic act.
Oh, we see.
This was about merging the legitimacy of the fallen Byzantine Empire with the rising power of Moscow.
So it's almost like he was strategically positioning himself as the inheritor of this grand legacy, right?
Precisely. He declared Moscow the Third Rome, and he claimed the mantle of protector of Orthodox Christians after the fall of Constantinople.
Wow.
And this was a turning point. It wasn't just about territory. It was about assuming a new role on the world stage.
The role intertwined with a sense of destiny almost.
The spiritual destiny.
It's fascinating how this fusion of political power and spiritual authority really seems to set the stage for a pattern that would continue for centuries in Russia.
Oh, absolutely. Ivan the Terrible comes to mind right away.
Yeah.
Solidified that model of centralized power. His ties with the church reinforced that idea of the Tsar as a divinely appointed ruler.
And it's fascinating how this model persisted through different rulers, different eras, even Peter the Great, known for his modernizing reforms.
Yeah.
He still maintained that fundamental link between the Tsar and the Orthodox Church.
You're absolutely right. He wanted to modernize the country, expand its territory, transform its military and bureaucracy, but that link with the church that remained.
It's almost like it was essential for legitimacy, right?
It was key, and you see it again with Catherine the Great.
Yeah.
Expanding the empire, embracing Enlightenment ideas, even corresponding with European intellectuals, but never wavering in her support for the church and the autocratic power of the Tsar.
So through all these dramatic changes and reforms, this core concept of a centralized autocratic state intertwined with the Orthodox faith, it remained a constant.
A constant. And I think that's crucial to understanding Russia both historically and today.
And that brings us to the question of modern Russia. How does all of this historical and spiritual legacy help us understand its place in the world today?
Well, we can't reduce modern Russia to its past, but understanding that legacy is essential.
For grasping its political culture?
And foreign policy decisions, even its sense of national identity.
So how do those historical echoes manifest themselves in Russia today?
I think it's important to note that even today, Russia remains a highly centralized state power concentrated in the Kremlin.
So that historical tendency toward centralized leadership, it's still very much alive.
Absolutely. And that close relationship between the government and the Russian Orthodox Church continues to this day.
Powerful.
The church supports the leadership, legitimizes their authority. It's a pattern we see throughout Russian history.
And it adds another layer to understanding Russia's actions on the global stage, right?
For sure, when we consider its assertiveness, its interactions with Europe, Asia, the Middle East, that historical lens becomes so important.
It's not just about, practical geopolitical calculations, but also this deeper sense of destiny almost.
That divinely appointed role.
That goes all the way back to this idea of Moscow as the third Rome.
Exactly. And I think it helps us to uncover some of those deeper motivations that underpin Russia's complex relationship with the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's a fascinating puzzle, and we're starting to piece it together.
We are, and I think we're really getting to some of the core ideas that shape Russia's self-perception and how it interacts with the rest of the world.
It's been an enlightening exploration so far, seeing how deeply history and spirituality are intertwined with Russia's political landscape even today.
Absolutely. And as we continue our deep dive, I think we'll explore how this legacy intersects with the complexities of modern Russia. The internal dynamics, the challenges it faces as a nation, trying to navigate the 21st century. As we sort of dig deeper into this idea of Russia's legacy, right, this historical and spiritual legacy, I think it's important to consider how it shapes not only its foreign policy, how it acts on the world stage, but also its internal resilience.
Yeah, that's a great point. The piece we're looking at really emphasizes Russia's, remarkable ability to withstand hardship and kind of emerge even stronger on the other side.
Exactly. They face so many challenges over the centuries, right? Invasions, revolutions, economic turmoil, and yet
Mhm.
every time they seem to find a way to endure, to rebuild.
To bounce back, yeah.
And I think the big part of that comes from this historical narrative we've been talking about.
Oh, interesting.
The idea of Russia as this chosen nation, this protector of Orthodox Christianity, the successor to a powerful empire.
Right.
These beliefs, they instill a profound sense of purpose, a sense of unity, even in the face of adversity.
It's like a shared story, right, that kind of transcends individual leaders or specific events.
Exactly. It provides a source of strength, this continuity, even through the toughest times.
And it's a story that's been reinforced and reshaped over centuries.
Over centuries. Think about the sheer vastness of Russia, right? It's a challenging climate. They've constantly faced threats from both east and west.
They've always had to be looking over their shoulder.
Always. And so all of that combined with this powerful narrative, it fosters this incredible sense of collective identity and a determination to persevere no matter what.
So the very geography and history of Russia, interwoven with this spiritual and historical narrative, you're saying that's what shaped this enduring spirit.
Yes, and it's not just about passively enduring hardship either, right? It's about this belief in Russia's ability to not just survive, but to overcome these challenges and emerge even stronger, playing a crucial role on the world stage.
And that brings us to another, I think, really key aspect of understanding Russia, its relationship with the West.
The West, such a complex relationship.
Right, by periods of, cooperation, rivalry, even outright conflict.
Back and forth, back and forth.
Why is that? What's at the root of this tension?
I think part of it stems from this idea of Russia as the Third Rome, right?
Okay.
This distinct civilization with its own unique values, its own destiny.
Separate from the West.
Separate from the West. And, that concept rooted in centuries of history has often fostered the sense of being both different from and at times threatened by the West.
Almost like a fundamental divide, right?
An us versus them mentality.
That goes way back.
Way back.
Yeah.
And it's fueled by memories of past conflicts, interventions, a sense of being misunderstood by the West, misrepresented even.
So this feeling of suspicion, defensiveness, it runs deep.
It's deep in the Russian psyche. And it's not just about historical grievances or, geopolitical rivalries either.
What else is there?
It's about different cultural values, different worldviews. Russia, with its emphasis on collectivism, strong leadership, the role of the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
It has a fundamentally different understanding of concepts like, democracy, individual liberty, the role of the state compared to many Western nations.
So these differences in values and political systems, that further complicates the relationship.
It creates this clash of perspectives, makes it difficult to find common ground to build trust.
Doesn't mean cooperation is impossible, though.
No, not at all. But it does mean that understanding Russia requires acknowledging these differences, these deeply ingrained differences approaching the relationship with a degree of cultural sensitivity.
It's a good reminder that history and culture, they really matter in international relations.
You got it. Now, it's crucial to remember that even with this historical and spiritual legacy, right, contemporary Russia isn't a monolithic entity.
Right. It's not as if everyone in Russia shares the exact same views on everything.
Exactly. There's diversity of thought, there's internal debates.
Mhm.
It's a vast country with a rich intellectual and cultural landscape. There are a multitude of viewpoints on the role of history, on religion, on the relationship with the West.
But this legacy we've been discussing, it still exerts a powerful influence, right?
It's a powerful undercurrent that shapes Russia's national identity, its perception of its place in the world.
So it's more like a dominant thing that runs through various aspects of Russian society and politics.
Precisely. A lens through which many Russians view their country's past, present, and future. And that, in turn, influences how they interact with the world, how they shape their own domestic policies.
And that brings us, I think, to the crucial question of how this legacy manifests itself in the complexities of modern-day Russian politics and its vision for the future.
That's where it gets really interesting, right?
Mm.
How does all of this history, all of this spiritual weight, how does that translate into action on the world stage today?
Exactly. I'm especially interested in, how this legacy shapes Russia's foreign policy.
Well, remember that idea of Moscow as the Third Rome, right? The defender of Orthodox Christianity, inheritor of this grand destiny.
That's a powerful idea.
These themes, even if they're not explicitly stated, they often underpin Russia's actions on the world stage.
So it's not just about, practical geopolitical goals, but also about this broader sense of mission.
A sense of fulfilling a historical and spiritual destiny?
It's almost like they're playing a role in a much larger story.
Exactly. It's a complex interplay of both. On a practical level, Russia is pursuing its national interests, security, economic influence, geopolitical power.
Right.
But these pursuits are often framed within this larger narrative of historical and spiritual significance.
Can you give us some concrete examples of how this plays out?
Sure, consider Russia's intervention in the Syrian conflict.
Okay.
Now, obviously, there were strategic geopolitical factors at play.
Of course.
But Russia's actions were also presented as protecting Christians in the Middle East,
Right.
directly echoing its historical role as a defender of Orthodox Christianity.
Wow, that's a powerful connection to draw.
It is, and it resonates deeply with many Russians who see their country as upholding this moral and historical duty.
Fulfilling its destiny, almost.
In a way. And similarly, Russia's approach to its neighboring countries, particularly those with historical and cultural ties to Russia,
Right.
it's often framed in terms of protecting its sphere of influence, ensuring its security. This idea that Russia has a right to exert influence in these regions because of its history, its position as a historically significant power.
It's fascinating to see how these historical threads, they continue to influence contemporary geopolitics.
It really highlights the importance of understanding a nation's history, its culture, its worldview.
You can't just look at the present moment.
Exactly. You have to understand where they're coming from, what has shaped their identity, their beliefs.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
We've covered so much ground, from the Byzantine Empire to contemporary geopolitics.
And I think we've just scratched the surface.
I know there's always more to explore.
Always. And in our final segment, we'll delve into the complexities of Russia's internal politics. That interplay between tradition and modernity, the challenges it faces as a nation navigating the 21st century.
We've been talking about the historical and spiritual currents that shaped Russia, its identity and how it interacts with the world. But let's shift our focus inward now and examine those complexities of Russia's internal politics. I'm fascinated by how the legacy we've discussed kind of interacts with, those forces of modernity that are shaping Russia today.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Contemporary Russia is a nation grappling with, these rapid transformations, globalization, technology, shifting social values. It's a dynamic process, this interplay between, preserving tradition and embracing change.
Right. And you see that tension playing out in various aspects of Russian society, right?
Yeah.
On one hand, there's this strong emphasis on maintaining continuity with its past, those historical and spiritual roots, preserving that unique identity.
Absolutely. And that's reflected in the close relationship between the state and the Russian Orthodox Church, the focus on social cohesion, the emphasis on patriotism and national pride. All that's deeply rooted in their history.
Right. But at the same time, Russia is also, a major player in the globalized world, right? They have a technologically advanced economy, a population increasingly connected to, global trends and ideas.
For sure. And that creates, a really fascinating dynamic. Think about the internet, for example. It's a powerful tool, connects people, fosters innovation, spreads information. But it also poses a challenge to, traditional hierarchies, that control of information.
Right. It's almost like a double-edged sword.
It is. And Russia, like many other nations, is grappling with that.
So they're navigating this delicate balance between, preserving that unique identity and adapting to the realities of the 21st century.
Exactly, this balancing act. And it plays out in all sorts of ways. Social attitudes, cultural expressions, economic policies, political debates. It's a constant negotiation.
And this interplay between tradition and modernity that must have profound implications for Russia's political landscape as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's this constant push and pull between those who want greater openness, liberalization, integration with the West, and those who emphasize stability, continuity, preserving Russia's distinct political culture. It's a dynamic that shapes everything.
Wow. So Russia is at this crossroads, seeking to define its path forward in a rapidly changing world while still holding on to, its unique identity, its sense of purpose.
That's a great way to put it. It's trying to reconcile its past with its future forge, a path that honors its history and traditions while also embracing those possibilities of the 21st century. And it's a challenge a lot of nations face, but it takes on a particular significance in Russia, I think, given its history, its size, its global ambitions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive, into what drives Russia. We've uncovered layers of history, spirituality, foreign policy, internal dynamics. What would you say are the key takeaways for our listeners as we wrap up?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that understanding Russia requires acknowledging the profound influence of its history and spiritual legacy, right? This legacy shapes how they see the world, their sense of identity, their actions on the world stage.
It's that lens we keep talking about.
Exactly. But it's equally important to recognize that Russia isn't simply a prisoner of its past.
Right.
It's a dynamic nation grappling with complex questions of modernity, globalization, its place in the world.
Russia's story is still being written,
Absolutely.
and its future trajectory will be shaped by how it navigates these tensions, right, between tradition and change, between its historical legacy and the demands of the present. Well, thank you for joining us in this fascinating journey into the heart of what drives Russia.
It's been a pleasure.
And we encourage you all to keep exploring this complex and compelling nation, its history, and its role in shaping our world.